Hey, what's up, everybody? Championship Leadership Podcast here, and today I'm excited. We have Anke Herrmann, and she's coming in from the south of Spain, from a place that I cannot pronounce. So we're going to leave it at that. And but she's the host of the Passion Business Podcast. She's a passion business coach. She works with solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, really in the early stages of their business to help them to grow and get to where they want to be. So with that, Anke, I really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I always started off this way. So the name of the podcast is called Championship Leadership. And so what comes to mind for you? Like, what does championship leadership mean to you when you hear that?
Inside out. It's inside out. It comes from you.
I love it. Yeah, what do you mean?
Like, what jumps to me that it's not about giving orders or telling other people what to do. It's more about leading in a sense of in the way you're showing up in the world yourself.
Yeah, that's great. I love that.
What jumps to mind.
Yeah. So are there any inside out championship leaders that come to mind for you? And if so, like maybe what are some of the things that really stand out to you, or maybe that you've even taken from some of these folks to kind of mold you into the leader that you are?
Jamie Smart would have to jump in there first. I trained with him, and he was one of those people who I first when I first came across him online. There was, Rich Litvin as well. I was looking at these people thinking, I want to be like you when I grow up.
Yeah.
So, and the biggest impact they had is basically showing me how we create our own world through the power of thought, through our own thinking, how we really are full of creative potential, full of resilience, and knowing how that works allows you to be really present with somebody else and sort of shine that light from the inside towards other people. So that's really, there are quite a lot of other people. There's, Michael Neal jumps to mind, Dr. George Pransky. Like there's a whole heap of people who've influenced me in that way that really have helped me get to where I'm now, and who knows where it goes next.
Yeah, I love it. So tell us a little bit more about yourself. And we've got the Passion Business Podcast, Passion Business Coach. Like, where did that all come about, or how did that originate? That's a very interesting and unique name. I love it. But yeah, tell us a little bit more about you and what you do, and maybe the path that got you to where you are today.
Yeah, I think the path, when I really look at it, it actually started back growing up in East Germany, when the wall was still up, and there was always a sense that, boy, there's got to be more to life than this.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how much you're aware of what life in East Germany was like, but it's a very small country. You weren't allowed out, and there was safety and security in a way, but at the same time, I never really learned to, I never really appreciated that as much. I always saw the bits that, but you have your safe career path, and you're safe, you go to uni if you get in, and then you get a job, and then you work, you retire, and you die, so there was no risk involved. But there was also always, for me, there was always the sense that the whole spice of life is missing.
Yeah.
There's so many things, there's so many places, and like a classic expression of that was when it was time to choose foreign languages beyond English and Russian we had at the time. I picked Latin and ancient Greek because I thought it was more useful than, learning French and Spanish, knowing that I would never be allowed to travel there. You know, so it was really that, and it felt to me, it really felt really small. you know, and at the same time, I watched my grandma, who had all these ideas, all these things she would have loved to do, and somehow with circumstances never got to do. So I think for me, that whole, like, yeah, I'd say passion of making the most of life and really like squeezing the juice out of it and trying things out, and rather go for it and fall flat on my face rather than always sitting there wondering what would have been if I had, you know. So that has been really, really strong, like, yeah, ever since I can remember. And so in that context, you know, when I basically came on a holiday to Spain back in 2002 and wandered through the old part of town thinking, boy, you know, I love I love the air, I love the simplicity, I love the whole air of flamenco music, and there was really like, oh God, I don't want this holiday to end, and I would really love to live here. Then it wasn't like, for me, it wasn't really that unusual to take that next step to think, so what would it take to pull off to actually move here? And I thought I'd rather give it a try, because compared to getting out of East Germany, that was like a, you know, not a one-way ticket, so who cares?
Yeah.
And I really thought I'd rather try it. And if I don't like living in Spain, well, then I just take my bag and go somewhere else. Like, it's not, you know, but I want to know. And so, yeah, the next step was, okay, what would you do for a living? I was working in IT as a software developer in a bank, and I think, you know, not exactly what I would want to keep doing if I were to move to the south of Spain. And then I remember the moment I was sitting in, like, I was in my living room cutting a dress on my dining table, and I had some flamenco music playing in the background, and I was like, yeah, that's what I do. Like, I knew, like, I'd have a sewing studio. And I'm not into fashion industry. I don't care. I want made to measure, unique kind of outfits that are really for a particular person, for a particular purpose. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I do. And then there was like, okay, so what exactly is stopping me? And I'm like, well, I don't know. Can't think of anything.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, I was like, I took a couple of years to sort of plan my exit, but then I did resign. I went to, you know, you can imagine a big London bank walk into the office of my boss and say, hey, you know, I'm going to resign. Why? Well, where are you going? What are you doing? I'm going to move to the south of Spain, and I'm going to make flamenco dresses. And, you know, they just thought I was totally nuts. And, but yeah, so I did. And I mean, I did have a sort of a remote contract for a few months, which was great. And I literally went in there with, you know, how hard can it be? You know, I knew how to sew, and you know, all I have to do is find somebody who buys an outfit I made, you know. and well, then I learned it wasn't all that easy, especially like in the beginning. Lots of hustling, lots of running around and knocking on doors and being kind of told to get lost, basically.
Yeah.
And but again, there was a bit of a stubbornness as well. I wasn't kind of crawling back to London and say, well, that didn't work out. So I basically got sort of a breakthrough order through some contacts that got me on, you know, got the ball rolling, basically. But I think and I thought, you know, okay, that's the happily ever after. But actually what happened was like the biggest challenge came afterwards. The biggest challenge came when I had enough orders and I had, you know, what looked like a successful business. I had actually gotten what I'd asked for, and realized, well, boy, I built myself a hamster wheel, right? I built myself a hamster wheel, and having grown up as being the good girl where yes is the default answer did not help with Spanish clients who are very outspoken when they want something, and they don't take no for an answer, even if you do say no. And for some find saying no extremely difficult. This was just like a recipe for, like, well, not disaster, but burnout. You know,
wow.
so I took about 8 years to get there, to really sort of wear myself out, to get to that point where I was like, you know what, if live your dream, if that's what that is, I want nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And had one of those, you know what, forget about it kind of moments. And I did look for a job, to be honest,
Yeah.
but it was like sort of in the middle of economic crisis, so there was like nowhere in hell anybody would have hired me. And and I was like, yeah, okay, well, the easiest way forward is make another skirt. But it was the moment where insights hit that changed the whole thing around, because it was the moment where I no longer cared about what would happen if I said no to something that I didn't want to do. Because the whole time there was always like, well, Granada's a small place, and they all talk and they all know each other. So if somebody says, come bring the dress to the theater at 10 at night, and if I say no, then she'll be upset, and then she'll tell everybody else about it. And before I know it, nobody will, and it had all grown via word of mouth. So I really thought, I cannot afford to peeve somebody off, but then when I got to that low point where I really thought, you know what, I'm just not having this anymore, I started to say no. And that's when really the surprise hit, because the reaction was like, oh, okay, I'll pick it up on Monday then.
Yeah.
And it was really like, oh, and it just really sort of dropped, like the penny dropped, that for all these years I had thought my pushy, demanding Spanish clients were causing the pressure and the stress that I was feeling. And in that moment, and obviously I tried it once and I tried it again, and I realized, boy, I had no way of predicting what would peeve off somebody, and usually I was wrong. And I realized that, well, actually it was the story that I'd made up about what saying no would mean that caused the pressure, not if somebody wanted their dress for a particular date, and that really was like, boy, it changed the whole experience. The first change I noticed was, oh, all of a sudden my clients were not nicer. And then I realized, well, even that wasn't right, because even that was like, well, they probably always were like that. You just could never see it because you're so strict and so pressured that you can't even appreciate it. And so shortly after that, there was people said, oh, you should write a book. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Like, a book is still just my story, and it isn't. So if anything, I'd love to help other people find their own way, because for me, it was the people pleasing thing. Somebody else has stuff around money going on that makes life difficult, and somebody else has things about I'm not good enough, or everybody has their own thing. So I thought I don't want to tell somebody my story. I want to help other people resolve theirs. And so that's where, I thought, well, okay, coaches do that. And that's when I sort of went back and did the coach training and started to transition, basically pivoting again, there we go, into what I'm doing now.
No, that's awesome. That's an amazing story. I love it. And, there's so many people that they go through life like that, especially, in the space as a coach, entrepreneurs, business owners that you're working with, they have some strong stories around people and around how things work or how they might play out that really, I bet had you came to that realization a lot sooner, it would have been, your story is your story and it happened how it happened. But at the same time, you can realize that, wow, like it really was just me the whole time that was getting in the way.
Humbling.
Yeah. And now you can help others as the coach, the passion business coach, to help them to avoid some of that stuff through the experiences that you've had. So take me back to, when the wall was taken down, like, what was that like for you? I can't, I can't really imagine what it had to be like. When you were describing it, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. As far as you just kind of were operating and doing what everybody else did, right? And you can't go. But that moment when it does, is it, what was that like? Do you remember where you were at? And also, are there others that maybe because it was a certain way for so long that even though the wall was gone, it was kind of like the wall was still there? That's kind of a question that I have in my head too, as I'm thinking about it.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, I know exactly where I was, and I still remember I was like, "Ugh," because I actually, well, I don't know, there was a couple of ways to get out of East Germany before the wall came down, and one was to sort of just sort of physically try and jump the border at the risk of getting shot, basically. And the other one was to hand in sort of paperwork, you know, to say, well, you know, I want to travel or whatever, you know, a couple of excuses. Went there and they basically told you, well, that doesn't have any legal grounding, go home, forget about that. But then, you know, basically you'd lose your job, you get kicked out of uni, and so you know you're being processed. And so I actually took that path, right? My parents did. And basically what happened, I actually got out in February 89 after 2 years of, you know, being in limbo without knowing whether you ever going to get out, and if then you don't know how long it takes. And then basically in February, I got this notification to say, okay, you've got 2 weeks. You need a whole lot of people to sign that they're okay for you to leave, that you don't owe them anything and whatever. And this is your train, out you go, and one-way ticket. You know, so, and I left with that, like thinking, okay, if I'm lucky, I might see my grandparents again, because pensioners were allowed to travel, because God, if they don't come back, we save some money. But, you know, anybody else, friends, family, I left knowing I would not ever see them again. Now, when in July, you saw on the news that people like that the Hungarians had sort of loosened the border, and people would, you know, each night, another 50, another 100 who would escape via the Hungarian-Austrian border. It was like so exciting, but at the same time scary, because there was always the sense they're going to come down on this.
Yeah.
You know, and even the day the wall came down, like everybody would have always, like, the question wasn't, will that wall come down? The question was like, when will the tanks come in?
Yeah.
You know, like even right to the very last minute, nobody believed it possible that this wall would ever come down in our lifetime. You know, so when it actually came down, we were like, oh, you know, there was a bit like, oh boy, I could have saved myself a lot of hassle. But then also what looked like a one-way ticket no longer was, you know. So it was like hugely liberating. And yes, I always thought that wall will remain at least another generation. And I saw it play out in 10 years later at a school reunion. And I went, and I just gotten back. I lived in Australia for 5 years, and I just gotten back to Europe, and there was like 20 something people, and I was the only one. There was one other guy who lived in Holland for a while, which is basically like next door. And everybody else was, some had gone to West Germany for a while, some were there, but a lot of them had come back. And there were still, I don't know, about 4 or 5 who were still living in walking distance of that school we went to. You know, and I'm like, yeah, but that, if you look at it, it really shows how it's never the event. It's it's about what you make of it. Because I always looked at, you know, we're so limited, and I want out. And these people basically felt like, okay, that's familiar. This is our home. This is where we have our roots, and this is where we stay. You know, same events, but it's just a totally different way of dealing with it or looking at it.
Yeah. So how have you taken, you know, that experience and the environment that you grew up in and everything that we've just been talking about to help you as the passion business coach, like when you're working with other entrepreneurs, like what are some of the lessons and things that you've learned through your life experiences that help others to create the life they want?
Well, one of the biggest thing is, like, you never know. Like, you can try and control, try and predict anything you like, but there's a good chance that you have no idea. And also, it's about, like, I think it often comes back to that dance with the unknown rather than try and run from it.
Mm-hmm.
to sort of embrace it. And it's like, if I've seen anything, it's like, even if you think, you're usually wrong.
Yeah.
And people do so much that isn't helpful in the name of security, control, predictability, certainty. And especially when you try and build your own business, like you know, you're on unexplored territory.
Yeah. Right.
Like there is no, and I really like, there is no proven path that you can follow. It's, and I think, and also there a lot of it is grit. Like really, you call stubbornness, or call it patience, call it determination, but that's the other thing that I see a lot, that people get discouraged very early, very easily, and that's not how that works either.
Yeah.
People always, and I think a lot of the information we get, sort of, if you look at online, about information of how to grow a business, there's always somebody who will offer you a quick fix, and you just follow my steps and you
Yeah.
will
Oh, yeah.
make
Right.
figures in 6 weeks.
It
And
doesn't work
it's
that way.
like, well, that's the thing. And I think that was even the motivation for the Passion Business podcast, because I am totally convinced that that is not how it works. Right?
Yeah.
It's damaging in the way that it sets certain expectations in people's mind. It's a bit like learn Spanish in 30 days. Yeah, right. Like I'm a language geek, and so I know, like, yes, of course, in a week you can learn enough to, order a beer and find your way back to the hotel. But, until
Yeah.
you understand a comedian on stage, you'll just need to invest a little bit more time. And I think it's the same with building a business. Well, yes, there are success stories, but you often don't, they often don't look at all the other stuff that's gone on before that one breakthrough that had things happen for them. And people get these ideas of how long things should take, and often out there with this looking for immediate sort of return on effort, like predictably quick. And, I'm thinking, well, no, sometimes you just have to, try here and that doesn't work, and then try something else. And, or, sometimes you have to go or stay at it for long enough to even know whether that works or not, So I think that knowing that you're going to be okay anyway, because that's the other thing, is like, what do you think that business is going to give you?
Yeah. 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 I love that. That's incredible. Yeah. And thank you for, it's great perspective, right, to have. And, a lot of what you're talking about, stories and just persistence, determination, discipline, staying in it. There are no quick fixes. It's so true, because there are a lot of people that are feeding off of that, or looking for that quick fix, and just wanting it to happen so fast. And there really is no shortcut for time and experience, and taking some lumps along the way too, right, to kind of figure it out, to get where you want to go. So it's important to not only have that, but then to have that support from somebody like yourself that's willing to help them through that, that's experienced it, right? You've actually lived it and gone through it. So what's a big vision for you? Championship leaders, they have great vision. What's a vision for you over the next 5 years, let's say, to where you want to go with the podcast or with your coaching? What kind of impact are you looking to make?
I'm all about encouraging and empowering and supporting people to make the most of their life, right? And get off autopilot. And if there is something you're curious about, and you think it's something that draws you in, something that pulls you in, to go for it and to really throw yourself in it. Because like, nobody gets to the end of their life thinking, oh, I wish I'd stayed safe, or I wish I'd worked more, or it's basically make it a crazy ride and enjoy it.
Yeah absolutely. So as we start to wrap this up, what are one or two things that you have learned along the way, or that maybe are kind of some guiding principles for you in your life, that you that the listener, you could give to the listeners that they could take, implement, put in their life, and move forward right away, like even today?
The first thing that jumps to mind is you always know enough to take the next step. And that's all you ever have to do.
Because that stops a lot of people from taking the next step.
Yeah, because they think they need to have the whole thing mapped out, you know, and I always think, well, you can't look around corners.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to know what's behind that, it's not a straight path. And if you want to know what's around that corner, you have to walk up to that corner.
Mm-hmm.
For the next part of the path to sort of unfold in front of you. But you can't figure that out sitting at your desk. So it's basically, you know, find the tiniest step you can take. And sometimes it's like, you know, find out the email of somebody, you know, make that phone call, send that message, reply, leave that comment. Like, it can be such, like the small, like it doesn't have to be a huge step. It can be small, but just take it without caring about what comes of it. Because I think once you produce something, once you do something, once you send that message, it's no longer yours. It can have a ripple effect. You have no control, and don't try and control that. It's no longer yours. Let it take its path. So it's really that, do it and don't think too much about it.
Beautiful. That's great advice. I love it. What are a few ways that the listeners can find out more about you and what you are doing and the podcast and everything else that you have going on in the south of Spain?
Yeah, the easiest way is like to go to passionbusinesspodcast.com. Well, that takes you to my website, which is ankeherrmann.com. That's Herman, double R and double N, ankeherrmann.com. I'm also active on LinkedIn. I'm active on Facebook. And so if you just type in ankeherrmann.com, Anke Herrmann in Google, you're going to find me.
And yeah, we'll get that linked up too, definitely. So is there a book? Is there a book coming? I know you mentioned that, and it sounds like you've been.
It's one of those things. It's one of those things. It's probably, it hasn't got a title yet, but I don't know. It's probably coming.
There's a book coming. Come on.
Probably, I think there's one maturing.
All right, great. I love it. So thank you so much for taking time to be here. I really do appreciate it. And what time is it there?
It's 5:20 in the afternoon.
5:20. Okay. Yeah. So it's 10:20 here. So appreciate you taking the time and being on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
You bet.